The previous week we had done the ballasting and gotten through that week pretty well, and come Monday morning we started to work on the physical preparation, which is pulling out the various lines. Bill and I were down in the engine rooms closing off spaces, removing the dehumidification tubing.
It's amazing how many different styles of hatches there are.
So that one's just for show. They cut the chain the day before we left because they weren't able to recover our anchor just yet.
There was a big dispute between the pilots and the tow master, which brought into a lot of research to figure out who was going to be the actual person in control of the ship. The tow master turns out to be in charge of a dead ship tow. There's a lot of political stuff in the Bay Area. It's a tight community, and you got to play fair and work through those issues and get everybody to get along and get the thing moved and do it safely and make sure you got the right depth of water. And
getting her out safely is a challenge here for the next, I think, a mile or so down the river. After that, I think it opens up a little bit.
So we were monitoring the situation in the bay. We were monitoring the river flows that were coming out of the mountains because it was pretty heavy last year, and seeing how the silt was changing, and it was changing almost on a daily basis out there.
She's pulling about 33 feet aft, which is, fairly deep. According to bathymetry, we have 32.5 feet of water depth, so we might be dragging in the mud a little ways out there, and we should have some horsepower to be able to deal with that.
The movement here of the Battleship Iowa is a challenging job in the sense that it's the deepest ship that is sitting up here in the reserve fleet, and the channel that we have to go through is not really a maintained channel. And what we had to do is we actually had to take the sounding charts that shows all these different readings every 50 feet through the whole bay, and then we sit down and determine the route that we take, and it's not marked.
We're fully confident now, after seeing the soundings yesterday, that we can take this thing across without bumping bottom on her.
This is considered to be a dead ship tow, which means that the ship does not have its own main propulsion. We determined that we need 4 tugs to move the ship safely. We designate one of the tugs as what we call a power tug, which is the fore and aft motion of the ship. We got to get across the shoal, but then right after we get over the shoal, we have a narrow bridge that we have to go through.
Well, right now it's kind of a standard route here. We don't really need the electronics for our position. It helps to measure our rate of turn and help steady on our course. But everything in here is basically through, as far as our position, is by eye. We have good open water, good deep water too. Catherine, left 45. So it was a pleasure and an honor to handle the Iowa. I may never get to handle a ship like this again, so I'm glad I got to do it now.
Until we finally put on our last mooring line and the last Crowley tug left. At that time it kind of set in, wow, the ship really is ours. And now finally we have that realization, nobody can stop us. We can actually start working on this ship right now, and that's what everybody wants to do.
We have in excess of 380 tanks on the vessel, plus a number of voids. So probably over 400 and some odd, 420. I really don't know how many voids and tanks in total. And that calculates out between 1 and 4 tank lids per tank or void, So we have in excess of 800 lids that we have to actually close up on tanks. They're all over the vessel. We're actually done with all the boiler rooms and engine rooms, but we've only barely cracked the surface of the wing tanks. It's a pretty substantial project in and of itself. And I've got about roughly a month and a half on the outside, 2 months to complete that. I sat down and calculated out what we probably have is somewhere on the order of 20,000 nuts and washers that we have to reinstall. It's just an amazing number. And we've had some great young people from California Maritime Academy. We've got a handful of Coast Guard people, and then just regular volunteers that have been down in these tanks, finding the voids that we don't really have a drawing for, and searching those out and closing them up, making new gaskets if we have to, sealing things up. It's a pretty big project.
Keep coming.
Just don't show my wife, okay? On the 70-year-old rope ladder. It is exciting. We've sat here for 3.5 months or better. The whole reason we're here in Richmond was to prepare for the tow down to LA and to prepare her for her arrival in LA. To be able to finally get that done is just absolutely thrilling. We've contracted with a local shipyard company, essentially a portable arrangement in this case.
I am the project manager, and I charge of the folks, the painters, the schedule, the planning. I walk around the ship throughout the day and make sure everybody's doing things the right way, make sure they're mixing the paint properly, make sure they're applying it correctly, make sure all the safety gear is on, glasses, hard hats, make sure no chips are in the water when we're washing freeboards. We have a crew of about 25, so that's 25 time cards I had to take care of.
We'll have probably 50 by the end of next week, so an awful lot of work going on. It's really an erector set. It's very adaptable, and you can stretch around various shaped objects on the ship, such as the funnels and the director towers.
It's a lot different than your basic construction job. It's, houses are square, nothing is squares on a ship. It's real different.
We do a lot of stuff like this that's odd shaped. Makes it fun. They're fun jobs.
There's nothing really square or easy on the vessel, so you really have to adapt. There's thousands of parts behind us, just thousands. And we'll have another 10 or 12 trucks here in the next week as we maneuver forward in the vessel and install more and more scaffolding.
Now, they were running low on material, so they had to get material from other states, other places, to complete the whole scaffold build.
And they'll be going up the forward mast even today and tomorrow. We hope to have the 2 forward turrets scaffolded up by the end of the week. It's a lot of work, and it goes together fairly fast, but a ton of work to do.
The last thing that was built was around the main deck for the sandblasting, and the pilot house had to get blasted, so that got off scaffold.
This is a construction site now. It's hard hat country, a little bit of danger added, of course, but for a construction guy or a shipyard guy, this is where it's at. You get to reface the ship, give her a facelift, and she's going to look awesome when she's done. When they get to the other areas of the ship which have poor existing paint conditions, they'll actually use a 5,000 PSI rotary head washer that will blow off most of the paint, probably down to the original epoxy from the 1980s.
So now we're getting cramped down to the last week where we're pushing pretty much 12-hour days.
First, we were just working normal 8 hours Monday through Friday. Now, 10, 11 hours, weekends.
We have a week left, and there's a lot of pressure on us, and we're gonna do our damnedest to get it done.
So the pressure's definitely on.
It's like they wrapped the ship in a big old ugly cocoon, and stuff happened inside the cocoon, and then the cocoon is broken open, and out came this beautiful, beautiful butterfly.
The last staging to come down is the bridge for the award decals and the number 2 turret.
2 months and a half. Build, come down.
From when we first showed up to how it looks now, it's a total makeover, basically.
We have a tentative date set of May 21 to depart Richmond, and we have about a 3.5-day tow down to Los Angeles. We'll be offshore in LA to clean her bottom for 3 or 4 days, so roughly a 1-week evolution. We have a whole process we have to follow. It involves what we call Soup Salve, the Navy supervisor of salvage. They actually have technical responsibility to make sure it gets done right. We have to come up with a Navy tow plan and submit it to everybody and get all the assets in line to do this. There's only a certain number of tugs that can actually handle a ship of this nature and make everybody feel comfortable. But when we approached Crowley, they responded realizing that this is the start of the Alaska towing season here in May, June. As the weather opens up north, they start towing up the big barges and the rigs and so forth.
We couldn't find a boat. A month and a half ago, there was not a boat available to take us. We didn't know what was going to tow us. We were looking at whether we were even going to get out of here or not. We caused almost a wreckage in our wake in towing operations up and down the West Coast. Behind the scenes on the Crowley side, from what I understand, it was a big mess.
But at the end of the day, I think that Crowley will figure out a way. Internally, they would like to see a Crowley vessel on the bow of the ship.
Yesterday we had an event, the day the Iowa didn't leave.
Well, it's like any other time you try to go to sea. Mother Nature has a tendency to be recalcitrant.
We contracted a private weather service, and that forecast started about a day before the tow. And it's a 5-day forecast. And when we got into Saturday morning, it was showing the weather system that we're dealing with right now that made us go all stop and not depart.
Right now they're calling for gale force winds and high seas from San Francisco all the way and worse down at Point Conception and on down to San Pedro, LA.
Even at her maximum horsepower, the tugboat would be pulled backwards in those conditions with the battleship in tow.
The risk to leave port with the vessel, it didn't make sense. It was a risk that wasn't worth taking.
We'll delay, we'll wait for better weather, and we'll live to tow another day.
As hard as it was to tell everybody here today that we're not going, you know what, at the end of the day, that's my job. I mean, I need to make sure this thing gets there safely.
The things that we were thinking about were a very large, very important PR boost for the ship as we leave San Francisco. There were a lot of other vessels that were scheduled and folks who had paid money to see the ship as it departed.
It was demotivating for everybody here, but we got through it, and we've waited a week to get going finally.
Crowley specializes in ocean tows like this, so when they hire us, I hope that they know that they can trust us. That's why they're coming to us, because when we do it right, and we get the job done the best we can.
Job like this size vessel, and this vessel of such importance, the company recognizes its value, so they put their A-team on it.
I'm just the captain. Just keep this menagerie pointed in the right direction. Well, they got a model and past experiences that tells them how much pull they need for the vessel in certain weather, and for the parameters they set up, this vessel could do the job. A whole bunch of dynamics there that there really are no answers to until you actually do it.
It's a big, heavy ship. The main consideration was weather and then our tow gear and having enough surge chain to keep from coming too tight on the chain because it's such a heavy, hard tow.
Well, this vessel right here, rudders are midships, screws ain't moving, and she's just dragging, so she's gonna do what she wants to do depending on what the season, what the weather wants to do. I mean, we've got control, we've got complete control, but it takes the skill of the skipper to maintain her.
For some strange reason, the harder we pull, the more it wants to take off, where we reduced RPM, it has seemed to follow in behind us.
The catenary is a dip in the tow wire, and it works as a shock absorber. You know, there's a lot of weight on the chain and also in the wire. And if there's a surge from the weather and the swells, you know, the weight of that, it'll start pulling on that catenary and straightening it out, and it will serve as a shock absorber.
The farther the wire goes out, the heavier it is. The heavier it is, the more catenary you have in it, which means you can shock it more without having to worry about it breaking. You want to see the chain stay in the water as much as possible.
The longer the wire, generally, the better things tow. You definitely don't want to see it pulling tight.
The winds had picked up and the seas had picked up. The captain was seeing the best way to tow the vessel. And I was actually off watch and got called on watch too. Sometimes when you lower the pin, the tow truck acts like a fifth wheel, a big diesel truck. And you lower those tow pins and it changes the pivot point of where you're pulling. And that didn't work. So we put the wire back between the bits and put the pivot point all the way back aft again. So it was the captain trying to decide the safest place to maintain the tow.
You're home, shed the brake.
Growing up, I went aboard the Massachusetts several times and just really loved it. So to be able to help get the ship ready and be involved with the great idea and concept of bringing it down to LA to become a museum, it's one of the best projects I've worked on so far here at Crowley. It's been great.
This will probably be the last battleship ever towed out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a great honor to do this. I've met some really great people here that have been working on this ship, donating their time, and they've done a beautiful job.